What if I told you that some of the most basic ideas of fairness you live by weren't invented in modern times? What if they were written down almost 4,000 years ago by a king in ancient Iraq? Sounds crazy, right? But think about this. If someone accuses you of a crime, they have to prove it. That feels like a modern rule, but it was actually carved into a 7-foot-tall slab of black stone in ancient Babylon. This isn't a fantasy. This is the story of one of the most important legal documents ever made, the Code of Hammurabi. And its influence stretches across thousands of years, secretly shaping the laws that guide our lives today. We live in a world of rules. From traffic laws to international agreements, our lives are guided by them. But where did it all start? How do you go from a world of chaos, of personal revenge and endless family feuds, to a society with order and justice? This was the huge problem facing the first great civilizations. And one ruler, a man named Hammurabi, the sixth king of Babylon, came up with a game-changing solution around 1750 BC. He gathered 282 laws, had them carved in the wedge-shaped script of cuneiform onto a massive stone pillar, and put it in a public square for everyone to see. That pillar, found by French explorers in 1901, now stands in the Louvre Museum, a silent monument to a king's ambition. The intro to his code declared his mission from the gods: to make justice shine in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoer, so that the strong may not harm the weak. This was way more than a simple list of rules. It was a promise to the public. It was the birth of the idea that justice should be predictable, permanent, and for everyone. To understand how radical this was, we first have to see the world it was born into. So, what was life like before Hammurabi's code? Imagine a world with no single set of laws. If someone wronged you, your options were pretty bad. You could complain to a local leader or priest, but their decision might change depending on their mood, who they were friends with, or who paid the better bribe. Or you could just handle it yourself. A stolen goat could easily turn into a blood feud between families that lasted for generations. A non-stop cycle of violence. Justice was basically random. It all came down to who you were, where you were, and who you knew. It's not that there were zero laws before this. Archaeologists have found older rulebooks, like the Code of Hammurabi, which is about 300 years older than Hammurabi's. But those earlier lists weren't nearly as detailed. They mostly focused on paying fines. Like you'd pay some silver for breaking someone's arm instead of having your own arm broken. Hammurabi, though, was running a huge, expanding empire. He'd conquered his rivals, which meant he was now in charge of a ton of different people with different customs. For any ruler, that's a massive headache. How do you get a merchant in the city of Ur to follow the same rules as a farmer near Babylon? A messy mix of unwritten local traditions was a recipe for chaos. Hammurabi's solution was born from pure need. He had to unite his empire, standardize justice, and prove he wasn't just another conqueror, but a king chosen by the gods to bring order. So, he gathered the old laws, updated them, added new ones, and then did something brilliant. He had them carved in stone and put out in the open. This created a single, powerful legal authority that stood above local feelings. It was a bold plan to create one system of order, and it was built on a few core ideas that we still feel today. The first revolutionary idea in Hammurabi's code isn't a law. It's the stone pillar itself. The law was now written down and put on public display. Think about how huge that is. Before this, laws were usually just spoken traditions, known only by a few people, like village elders or priests. Justice could be a secret weapon used by the powerful. By carving 282 laws on a massive, 7.5-foot tall stone and putting it in a public place, Hammurabi broke their monopoly. He was basically announcing, the law belongs to everyone, This simple act is the ancestor of every law book on a shelf and every legal website we use today. It's the beginning of the idea that not knowing the law is no excuse. For the first time, people across an empire could, in theory, go to a central place and see the rules for themselves. They could read the simple if-then format. If you do this, then this is the consequence. It created a level of transparency that had never existed on this scale. The monument itself was designed to be impressive. At the very top, there's a carving of King Hammurabi standing before Shamash, the Babylonian god of the sun and, more importantly, the god of justice. Shamash is on a throne, handing Hammurabi a rod and a ring, which were symbols of God-given power. The message was perfectly clear. These aren't just the king's personal rules. These are the laws of the gods, delivered through the king. This divine stamp of approval made the laws incredibly hard to argue with. This wasn't just Hammurabi telling you what to do, this was the universe itself. This blend of religion and law was a genius move, cementing the idea that the government was the ultimate source of justice. But it's not just that the laws were public. What those laws actually said would introduce an even more radical concept. Picture this: you're a Babylonian shopkeeper. A rival stands up in public and accuses you of stealing from him. Before Hammurabi, that accusation alone could ruin you. Your reputation would be trashed, and you could be punished just based on his word. But under Hammurabi's code, the game changed. It put the burden of proof firmly on the person making the accusation. This isn't exactly innocent until proven guilty, but it's a critical first step. You weren't guilty just because someone said you were, they had to prove it. The first few laws of the code make this crystal clear. Law 1 says that if you accuse someone of a crime that carries the death penalty but can't prove it, you will be put to death. Let that sink in. If you accuse someone of murder and you failed to back it up, you face the executioner. Law 2 does something similar for accusations of witchcraft. If you accuse someone of sorcery, the accused is sent to the holy river for a trial by ordeal. If they drown, the accuser gets to take their house. But if the river proves their innocence, meaning they survive, the accuser is put to death, and the person they accused gets to take their house. This shows how their system was different. It relied on the gods to show the truth, not just on evidence. But these brutal penalties served as a powerful warning against making false accusations. It forced people to think twice before pointing a finger. The code constantly stressed the need for evidence and witnesses. Law 7, for instance, says if you buy something from someone's son or slave without a witness or a written contract, you're a thief and will be executed. The whole system was built on sworn testimony, with the powerful belief that the gods would punish anyone who lied under oath. This focus on proof is an ancient root of having a fair legal process. The idea that an accusation is not a conviction is a 4,000-year-old principle, carved in stone. When most people hear Code of Hammurabi, one phrase comes to mind: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This principle, called lex talionis, has given the code a reputation for being savage. And let's be real, many of the punishments are shocking. Law 195 says that if a son hits his father, his hands will be cut off. Law 218 says that if a surgeon performs a major operation and the patient dies, the surgeon's hands will be cut off. That's undeniably gruesome. But to dismiss an eye for an eye as just bloody revenge is to miss the entire point. In its day, this was a rule of limitation. Before this, revenge could spiral out of control. If someone from another family poked your eye out, your family might feel justified in killing him, his brother, and burning down his village just to be safe. There was no limit. An eye for an eye changed that. It said the punishment must fit the crime. You can take an eye for an eye, but only an eye. It was the world's first attempt to write down the rules of proportional justice, to stop one crime from exploding into endless destruction. But here's where things get complicated, and to us very wrong. The punishment often depended on your social class. Babylonian society was split into three main groups: the Amalu, the upper-class elites, the Mushkanu, regular free people, and the Arduous slaves. The law did not treat them equally. Law 196 says, "If a man destroy the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye." That's the classic rule, but it only applied between social equals. Law 198 tells a different story. If he destroy the eye of a freeman, he shall pay 1 mina of silver. And if the victim was a slave, the penalty was even lower. This is horrifying to our modern belief in equality before the law. But in ancient Babylon, this system was designed to keep the social structure from falling apart. It reinforced the idea that a nobleman's body was literally worth more than a commoner's. So while an eye for an eye seems barbaric, it was a two-sided coin. On one side, it was a giant leap towards limited, proportional justice. On the other, it was a system that cemented the deep social unfairness of its time. It was a messy, but revolutionary, first try at answering the question, what is a fair punishment? The last, and maybe most important, legacy of Hammurabi's Code is the idea that the government enforces justice. By creating this public set of laws, Hammurabi announced that arguments would no longer be settled with personal revenge. From now on, they would be handled by the state, through an organized system of courts and judges. This was a massive change in how society worked. The code covered a stunningly wide part of everyday life, showing just how much the state was becoming the final referee. Nearly half of the laws are about contracts, business, and property. There were laws setting wages for workers. For example, an ox driver was guaranteed to be paid a certain amount of grain per year. There were rules for marriage, divorce, inheritance, and adoption. And then there were laws about professional responsibility, designed to stop people from being lazy or careless. This brings us to one of the most chilling laws in the entire code, the law of the builder. Law 229 states, if a builder builds a house for someone, and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built falls in and kills its owner, then that builder shall be put to death. And Law 230 continues, if it kill the son of the owner, the son of that builder shall be put to death. This is an eye for an eye taken to a terrifying new level. To us, killing a builder's son for the builder's mistake is monstrous. But in the logic of Hammurabi's world, it was seen as a kind of grim, symmetrical justice. It also shows the code's intense focus on making people accountable for their work. Actions had severe, predictable consequences. By creating laws that regulated everything from the rental price of an ox to the penalty for medical malpractice, Hammurabi was building the skeleton of a modern state. He created a system where you took your fights to a judge, presented your evidence, and received a final decision based on a written code. This replaced the chaos of private wars with the ordered, if brutal, process of state-run justice. That very idea, that the government, not private citizens, settles legal disputes, is the foundation our entire judicial system is built on. The echoes of Hammurabi's code are all around us. For over 1,500 years after he died, scribes across the region kept copying and studying his laws. His code became the blueprint for later legal systems in the ancient world, and its principles can even be seen in the laws of the Old Testament. When that giant black stone was pulled from the ruins of an ancient city in 1901, it was more than just an amazing archaeological find. It was a direct connection to a world that was wrestling with the same questions we do today. What is justice? What is fair? How do we protect the weak from the strong? Hammurabi's legacy is so huge that his portrait is carved into the wall of the U.S. Supreme Court building, right alongside other great lawgivers from history. His code wasn't perfect. Its justice was divided by class and gender, and its punishments were often cruel. But it was a monumental first draft. It was a bold statement that society could be run by rules and reason, not just by impulse and chaos. The laws that secretly rule us aren't so secret after all. They're part of a long, unbroken conversation about justice that started thousands of years ago in ancient Babylon. The Code of Hammurabi reminds us that our modern legal world wasn't built overnight. It was built on foundations laid 4,000 years ago, by a king who dared to carve justice into stone. If you found this trip into our hidden legal past fascinating, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Which of Hammurabi's laws shocked you the most? Was the punishment for the careless builder, a son for a son, fair for its time, or just barbaric? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching.